I just wish I knew. What's going on, guys? John Kelly here. Today I want to talk to you about the things I wish I would have known when I first got into backpacking. But before we do that, why don't you do all the things? Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, find out when the videos drop, and let's get into the good stuff now. When you first get into backpacking, you are going to make mistakes. It's not if, it's when. It just happens because we're new to this whole thing. We don't know everything. We tend to think we do, but we know we don't. So today I'm going to share with you things I wish I would have known when I first got into backpacking. The first one is simply that waterproof isn't better, and I'm talking specifically about footwear. I think like everybody else, when you first get into backpacking, the first thing you want to do is go find yourself a good pair of hiking boots. And you want to make sure they're waterproof because everybody knows that good hikers wear waterproof hiking boots. Truth is, as most of us know, we don't typically backpack in boots unless it's wintertime. Typically, we're wearing hiking shoes or trail runners. And most of us have realized that waterproof isn't better. I remember buying my first pair of hiking boots. I remember going to my local outfitter, and there was a guy there who was getting ready to go on a backpacking trip, and he was buying these bright red, blue, and yellow hiking shoes, but they weren't hiking shoes, they were trail runners. It looked like something that somebody who's running a race would wear. He puts them on, he tries them out, he thinks they're great, and I asked him if they were waterproof, and he said, "Man, I don't wear waterproof shoes." What? What do you mean you're not wearing waterproof shoes? Of course you gotta get waterproof shoes, right? Because you gotta keep your feet dry. That's when my eyes were open to the reality of hiking. He looks me straight in the eye, and he says, "Dude, your feet are gonna get wet anyway." Never even thought about the fact that there's a chance my feet may get wet anyways, because your shoes don't cover up your ankles. Heck, your boots barely cover up your ankles. You're probably gonna get wet, but wouldn't it be nice to have shoes that at least keep your feet dry most of the time? I asked him that question and he just looked at me and said, "Nah, man," he said, "once your feet get wet, those shoes don't drain out. They don't even dry very well. It's not bad if you're a day hiker, but if you're gonna go backpacking, you're gonna hate your life." And sure enough, I did what anybody would do after hearing that news. I went ahead and bought the waterproof boots because there's no way he was right. There are just days when you question your own sanity, right? I did figure out that that was a bad idea. And as a result, now when I hike, I always hike with trail runners. Even in the wintertime, I typically hike with trail runners, and I wear a pair of sealskin socks to keep my feet dry. But I typically like the trail runners. I like the fact they dry out quickly. Your feet will get wet. Your feet will get wet and dew if you wear those shoes. But they dry quicker. They drain. Your feet don't have to be soaked all day if it's warm out. Going with a waterproof trail runner does not mean that you're getting something better. Now, some people really love waterproof boots and waterproof shoes, and you're probably a day hiker if you do. I know a few people that wear waterproof shoes when they go backpacking, but they're pretty far and few between. That was backwards. They're few and far between, but there are a lot of people out there that do that. But if I was giving advice to somebody who's new, I would say don't assume that waterproof shoes are better because your feet are probably going to get wet anyways. Item number 2 on my list is that I always take a GPS unit with me when I go out on the trail. This is the Zoleo satellite communicator. Something like this is always great to have with you on the trail. When I was doing the Sheltowee Trace with my friend Brian, we were hiking a section of the trail around Cave Run Lake here in Kentucky, and they had extended the trail a little bit, rerouted it, added a few miles to the walk, and it moved us further from water. That day I didn't bring as much water with me because I thought we only had to go so far to get to water, and I was wrong. And so I got a little dehydrated that day, and so the hiking was a little bit slower. It took us a little longer to hike the trail, also because of the added miles, it added time, and Brian's wife was coming to meet us. She was planning to meet us alongside at just some country road in the middle of nowhere, and all she had were some GPS coordinates. Well, when it took us longer to get done with our hike and it started to get dark outside, she started to panic a little. She got a little upset, and by the time we'd gotten to her, she'd been in tears because she was worried something was wrong with us, but she couldn't get a hold of either one of us. So if we'd have just had something as simple as this with us, we could have been able to communicate with her and found a way to kind of ease her soul, I guess, so that she wouldn't be so upset. And you'd be surprised how many times when you're out in the backcountry and the hike just goes sideways. It happens. It happens all the time. And when it does, it'd be really wise to have a GPS unit with you that you can communicate to people in your family, your friends, someone who's coming to pick you up, whatever it is that you're doing, making sure that you've got that ability to communicate with other people. Now, I know there's going to be some people that are like, well, they hiked without GPS units for hundreds and hundreds of years. Yeah, but you're telling me that if they could have had one, they wouldn't want it? Yeah, they would have. So take advantage of the technology we have in 2021 and take a GPS unit with you. The next thing that I wish somebody would have told me early on was to make sure when you have a ground sheet that it stays under your tent. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, of course the ground sheet goes under your tent. Where else is it going to go? What I mean is, don't let it hang out the sides of your tent, especially if you're going to have bad weather. When I was on a trip with a good friend of mine, we decided we were going to go out for a weekend, do some backpacking, and it decided it was going to rain one night. So we got to camp, got our tent set up as fast as possible. I got out this ground sheet right here. I put it under my tent and didn't pay attention to the fact that it was sticking out about 3 or 4 inches on the side. If it's sunny out, if it's a nice day, it doesn't really matter much. But when it rains, because that was sticking out the side 3 or 4 inches, when the rain came down, it hit that ground sheet and just went directly under my tent. The next morning, I woke up with puddles underneath my tent. I felt like I was sleeping on a waterbed. And if there had been any holes in the bottom of my tent would have been filled up with water. And it could have been avoided very easily by simply keeping that ground sheet under the tent and not exposed. So when you're setting up your tent, when you're getting a ground sheet, or if you're cutting up something like this for your tent, make sure you don't make it so big that it sticks out the sides, because when you get into some inclement weather, that could be absolutely miserable. Tip number 5, the sit pad is invaluable. And I'm not kidding. These things are great, whether it's a cheap $5 one like this, or you get a Z-Pad from Thermarest, or one of the Gossamer Gear sit pads. These things are absolutely incredible because they're not just for sitting on. Now, obviously, spread it out, sit on it, you've got a nice cushioned sit pad, which is fantastic. But this can be used for so many other things. I've used it to fan a fire, to build the fire up. I've used it as the doormat for my tent, so when I get in, I don't have to put my knees in the dirt. Also, if the ground's hard, I don't have to put my knees on hard ground. I can just put my feet on this and use this as a welcome pad for my tent. I also use it in my hammock from time to time, just as a way to keep my feet warm. These things are so valuable. There's so many different uses for these, and for the price and weight, they're 100% worth it. Even when I take a chair backpacking, I still bring a sit pad because I end up using it every single time. These things are invaluable. I wish I'd have known that from the beginning. I would have never gone without one. But I would dare say, if you don't have one, you can buy these for $5 on Amazon, and they're 100% worth it. The next item on the list is food. Specifically, the fact that your eyes are bigger than your stomach when it comes to food. If you talk to most backpackers, probably 90% of them will tell you they always overpack when it comes to food, which can be frustrating when you're backpacking because food can be so heavy. I know when I first got started, I thought I was going to eat all these snacks when I was out backpacking. I thought I was going to get the hiker hunger. Let's be honest for a second. Unless you're through hiking and you're hiking weeks and months at a time, hiker hunger is probably not going to hit you on a weekend trip. You might get hungry, but you're not going to get hiker hunger. I found that I'm not as hungry on the trail as I thought I would be. I don't eat half the snacks I thought I would. When I used to get ready for trips, I would load up on the snacks. I would think I'm hiking 15 miles. So if I'm going to hike 15 miles, I need to bring 2 Welch's fruit snacks. I need to bring a granola bar and a Lara bar for that trip. Just for that day, for a snack. I wasn't eating hardly any of that. And then I would bring extra food just in case I ate all of that. What would end up happening is my food bag would be so heavy, and then when I get done at the end of the trip, it's still half as full as it was when I got there because I was packing too much food. And I would dare say a lot of you, as you get started backpacking, or even if you're a veteran now doing it, you probably still struggle with that. It wasn't until I went to Alabama back in November that I had my first trip where when I got off the trail, I had eaten every bit of food that was in my food bag. I finally got it figured out, but it took a lot of miles and a lot of trips to get there. So I would challenge you, try not to take too much food. If you're new to backpacking, you're probably going to try and bring as much stuff as you can. Just be really careful not to bring too much and weigh yourself down and take some of the joy away from your trip, because all that extra weight really can weigh you down and make hiking a lot more difficult. And the last tip is really a simple one, and that's that no piece of gear is for everyone. When I first got into backpacking, everybody was wearing Ultra Lone Peaks, and so I decided I was going to get myself a pair. So I got a pair of the Ultra Lone Peak 3.5s, and at first I loved them. Super lightweight, you could feel the trail under your feet. The tread was I wasn't so crazy about the tread, but it worked. And I love the shoe. And then I had my first 15-mile day. I don't love the shoe anymore. My feet blistered up so bad. I was hiking in the Red River Gorge, and I remember a friend of mine was with me. His name was Julio, and Julio broke his foot. And so I was going back and forth, checking on Julio, hiking ahead to find my friend Brian, and just kind of doing this back and forth thing. And a hike that probably should have been 14 miles ended up being 20. And by the end of the day, I had blisters on my heels. I had blisters on the bottoms of my feet. My feet felt like hamburger. What I found was when you're heavier, you want the stack height to be a little bit deeper in your shoes. Because of my weight, that low stack height that's in the Ultra Lone Peaks actually caused damage to my feet. Now, you got someone who weighs 150 pounds hiking in Ultra Lone Peaks, they're not going to have the same experience that I had. But that just goes to tell you that not every piece of gear works for everybody. Whether it's shoes or socks or backpacks, whether you want to go with a quilt or a sleeping bag, whatever it is, you need to find gear that fits you. Don't just assume because everybody else is using it and everybody else loves it, it's going to work for you, because it may not. So whenever you're buying shoes, whenever you're doing any kind of purchasing for backpacking, make sure you find some kind of an outfitter to go to. Try on backpacks. Take a sleeping bag and wrap it around yourself to see how warm it actually feels. Try on different shoes. Find the ones that are the most comfortable. Find the ones that you think your feet are going to like the most and wear those. Don't just buy something because it's a fad. The best purchases I ever make are the ones I make where I actually have the ability to try out the gear or at least have some kind of experience with it. So make sure whatever you're buying, don't assume because it works for everybody else it's going to work for you. Backpacking is very personal. And backpacking gear is even more personal. So make sure whatever you buy it with yourself in mind and not worried about what everybody else is doing. So what about you? What are some lessons you learned when you started out backpacking? What are some things that you know now that you wish you would have known when you started out? Leave those in the comments below. I would love to hear what you guys have learned over the years. If you liked the video, give it the thumbs up. If you didn't like the video, give it a thumbs down. And then give it another thumbs down. That'll work. If you haven't already, go over to my Instagram and check out pictures from my recent trips, things that are going on in my life, and updates from the Backpacking Podcast with myself and Jeremiah Stringer. It is absolutely one of the best times that I have when I get to sit down with Jeremiah and just talk about backpacking. So until next time, stay strong, hike long, and I will catch you on the next go-around. Wow.